The first warning came from the ventilation system. It wasn't an alarm, it wasn't a flashing light or a blaring siren. It was a quiet, confused ping from a sensor that had no category for what it was detecting. Unknown airborne compound detected. Classification, non-toxic. Psychological response, elevated. The station AI flagged it as an anomaly and routed the notice to operations. Commander Jalen Ross ignored it at first. He was busy arguing with a coalition quartermaster over ration allocations when the second warning appeared. Secondary response detected. Multiple juvenile entities altering course. Cause, airborne stimulus. That made him pause. "What do you mean, airborne stimulus?" Jalen muttered, pulling the report up on his console. The answer came 30 seconds later, drifting invisibly through the corridors of Station K-Row 7. Warm. Sweet. Comforting. The unmistakable smell of human food. K-Row 7 was not designed for comfort. It was a coalition juvenile observation and acclimation station, a polite term for a place where alien young were kept, studied, and evaluated before being introduced to wider galactic society. The station housed cubs, kits, hatchlings, and spawn from a dozen apex species, each separated into carefully controlled environments. Humans insisted on being present. The coalition allowed it under strict conditions. No interference. No bonding. No feeding. Especially no feeding. Human food was classified as a contaminant risk, not because it was dangerous, but because it was effective. It started with Mira Patel. Mira was not a soldier, not a scientist, and definitely not part of the coalition's original plan. She was a civilian contractor, a systems maintenance specialist assigned to K-Row 7 because humans insisted on redundancy. She hated the station. It was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. So she cooked. Not for anyone else, just for herself. A small hot plate in her quarters, a battered pan she'd smuggled aboard, powdered cocoa mix, condensed milk, spices she rationed like treasure. When she was stressed, she cooked. When she was lonely, she cooked. And when she cooked, the station filled with scent. The day it happened, she was making a simple stew. Nothing special, just something warm that reminded her of home. She didn't know that alien olfactory receptors were, on average, 3 to 7 times more sensitive than human ones. She didn't know that juvenile apex species were neurologically primed to associate unfamiliar but pleasant scents with safety. She didn't know that the ventilation system connected far more compartments than it should have. All she knew was that the stew smelt good. The first cub to arrive wasn't supposed to be able to leave its enclosure. It was a Threxian juvenile, 6 legs, scaled hide, oversized eyes adapted for low-light hunting. The enclosure door was sealed, monitored, and alarmed, yet the sensors recorded movement. The cub pressed its face against the transparent barrier, nostrils flaring. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air. It made a sound, not a threat call, a questioning trill. The door did not open, so the cub waited. The first cub to arrive wasn't supposed to be able to leave its enclosure. It was a Varnai cub, furred, fanged, pack-bred, abandoned a scheduled combat simulation and simply left. It followed the scent trail down a corridor it had never been taught to navigate. Then another, and another. Within minutes, half a dozen juvenile enclosures reported elevated agitation. Not fear, not aggression, but focused interest. Operations panicked. "This is not a drill," a coalition handler snapped. "Why are they converging?" Jalen stared at the thermal and movement maps blooming across his screen. "They're not charging," he said slowly. "They're following." Following what? Jalen inhaled. The air smelled like stew. "Oh no," he said. Mira was humming quietly when the first shadow appeared beneath her door. She frowned, ladle paused mid-stir. "Maintenance already?" she murmured. The knock that followed was not from a human hand. It was a soft thump, then another. Cautious, curious. Mira opened the door a crack and found herself staring into 6 enormous reflective eyes. The Threxian cub sat directly in front of her door, tail wrapped nicely around its body. It tilted its head, scenting the air eagerly. Behind it, further down the corridor, more shapes appeared. Fur, scales, claws. Cubs. Lots of cubs. Mira froze. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh no." Station security arrived in force. Stun fields crackled, containment barriers deployed, coalition handlers shouted in half-dozen languages. The cubs did not attack. They sat. They waited. They stared at Mira's door with single-minded devotion. One Varnai cub crept forward and sat beside the Threxian, their species' ancient rivalries apparently forgotten. A handler raised a weapon. Mira stepped into the hallway. "Stop," she said. The word cut through the chaos like a blade. The cubs turned toward her as one. She held up the ladle, stew dripping back into the pot. "I think," she said carefully, "they're hungry." The coalition officers stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "You are not authorized." "I know," she said, "but look at them. They were not aggressive. They were not feral. They were hopeful." Commander Jalen Ross arrived just in time to see Mira kneel on the floor. Every instinct in him screamed that this was a mistake. Every human instinct told him it wasn't. She dipped the ladle into the pot and poured a small amount onto a disposable heat tray, letting it cool. Slowly, deliberately, she slid it across the floor. The Threxian cub sniffed, paused, then lapped at the stew. Its eyes widened. A low, stunned rumble escaped its chest. The Varnai cub leaned in next, then another. Within seconds, the tray was clean. The cubs sat back on their haunches, tails thumping, ears perked. Then they did something no one expected. They looked up at Mira and ran back to their enclosures. The station went silent. Coalition officials demanded explanations. Reports were filed, warnings issued. But the data told a different story. Stress markers dropped across multiple species. Aggression incidents declined. Sleep cycles normalized. The cubs gathered near ventilation grates during Mira's cooking hours, calm and content. The coalition tried to ban human cooking. The cubs protested, loudly. One even triggered a station-wide alert by attempting to chew through an air duct. The elders convened. They reviewed footage. They listened to audio logs of cubs attempting to mimic the word food in broken human standard. And reluctantly, they approved an experiment. They called it controlled nutritional exposure. Humans called it dinner. Mira was given a proper kitchen. Under supervision. Under rules. But allowed. The cubs were introduced in small groups. No force, no restraint. Just bowls placed gently on the floor. The effect was immediate. Pack species began sharing. Solitary species tolerated proximity. Natural hierarchies softened. Bonding behaviors emerged. Not dependency, but trust. The coalition had never seen anything like it. It took weeks for them to understand. Human food was not magic. It was memory. It was warmth and patience and the promise that someone had taken time to care. Apex predators did not fear humans because of weapons. They feared them because humans could walk into a room full of monsters and make them feel safe. Years later, when the cubs returned as adults, strong, disciplined, fiercely loyal allies, they brought gifts, spices, ingredients, recipes adapted for human mouths. They visited Cairo 7 not as subjects, but as guests, and every time the air filled with the smell of human food, they came running. Not because they were hungry, but because they remembered who fed them when the galaxy thought they didn't need kindness.